All right. Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
All right. Um, Hope everybody's good. Uh, letting in a
Morning.
couple Morning, letting in a couple of people here, and yeah, we should start. Um, uh, Richard and I we just had our we just had our meeting, and I don't know if you wanted to reflect on Richard. I don't need to put you on the spot. I don't know if you wanted to reflect on what we were talking about because I think it has to do with this whole question of this whole thing about what it means to follow Jewish law. I don't know if you wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit because I think it may be a good um, at least beginning of our discussion. We can see where it goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not to put you on the spot, Richard.
Yeah. I mean,
No, no,
I
no, no problem. We were talking about first of all that no matter how observant you are, someone's going to do it better. And some people will say it's just too much, or other people will say I tried and failed. But what do you do with that? And we talked about the motivation for doing it. Do you do it out of your ego to say, I can do this, I can do all these things I'm supposed to do, or do you do it out of your heart because you're trying to please God? You're trying to live the way God would want you to live.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
that's a good way of putting it. So, I mean, when I started out, I tried to do as much as possible, and that was not a good idea. It was way too much. I was over my head. And so I decided I needed to go back and revisit and what is it that I want and what do I want out of my journey into Judaism. And I put everything back that was important to me. Like Shabbat was, a no-brainer. Kashrut was a no-brainer. Um, Joining a synagogue was a no-brainer. So I would have a community. Um, and then the details, I gradually, worked them out. Some of them I did right away. Some of them I didn't, and I had to, adjust. But it took some doing, and I had a family, um, and had to deal with that. And I was a student and had to deal with that. Then I finished and I moved away. And, so, but slowly but surely, I found my way of being Jewish that felt comfortable. And that's, also, it was a big help when I came here. We had a Havurah. We formed a Havurah at the time when I came. And so to have friends who had been Jewish for, most of them from birth, and to meet up with them every month and talk about things and do things, I learned a lot from them. So I think community probably was the most important thing for me in getting to a level where I felt comfortable.
Yeah, I'm often I often think back of the story of a of a couple who um they had been they lived in like the most like rural of rural Texas, right? Not a Jew in sight.
Right.
And they and this couple, they began to like talk about, where they were in their Christianity and things like that. And they said, okay, well, let's go and look at the in the Old Testament, are we sure we're doing this right? And they came to the conclusion that, like that, Christianity has it wrong, Judaism has it right for them. And so they began to do things, but again, they were so isolated, and this is pre-internet, and they couldn't just sort of look stuff up, at a snap of a finger. And so it's like, well, they had the Bible, right? So they began to institute certain things based on their reading of the Bible. So there was one time where you're supposed to, it's like that these words of the Shema you're supposed to write, on the doorposts of your gates. Now, we we put it in a little scroll, and we put it,
Right.
on a little, we put it, it's a mezuzah, right?
Right.
They actually took paint and they went to their front door and literally painted, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord," and and the neighbors were walking by going, "What?" And it wasn't until they began to contact community and be a part of community that began to be like, "Oh, okay, we didn't have to do that." So yeah, I mean, it's not impossible to be Jewish without a community. It's not impossible, but it really helps. And it really makes a difference. And it is a religion meant to be experienced communally.
Right.
To give yourselves, frames of reference, in terms of, how people make decisions on a day-to-day basis on how they do things, right? I mean, you wind up learning from other people in terms of how they manage X, Y, and Z. Not that you have to necessarily do things the way they do it, but you get little bits and pieces of how they do things. I feel like my observance is a hodgepodge of the of examples of observance that I learned, that I saw from, like, probably a half a dozen people. It's like, oh, I learned about doing this from this person. I learned about doing that from that person.
Mhm.
Were any one of those people, my model for everything? No.
No.
But as you are around people, you kind of say, "Ooh, I like how they did that. Oh, I didn't like how they did that. All right, so I don't have to do that. I mean, or I or I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it my way, or I'm going to do it, or I agree with this opinion, I don't agree with that. I mean, like, if it were, there are just so many different directives that it becomes really hard to say that there's only one way of doing it.
Right.
So anyway, I wanted to reflect on that, that idea. I don't know if anybody else has other comments or thoughts about, um, on what it means to feel commanded. Because again, it's so tempting in some ways. Like, parts of our brain are like, "Oh, well, it says we have to do it. We have to do it. Full stop," right? And then how do we deal with it when we don't do it, or we don't do it quite exactly as a book tells you? So, Gilly, I'm hearing some background noise where you are.
It is me.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I totally forgot.
No worries. Okay, sorry. It's okay. No problem. I just wanted to check on that. Other questions people might have before we delve back into the Shulchan Aruch?
But you brought up the communal aspect of
Yeah.
Judaism.
Mhm.
Coming from Christianity, that seems to be one of the major differences in that Judaism, it's a God relating to a people, rather than in Christianity, it's very much you and God. It has nothing to do with the community itself. It's your own relationship with God.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's very different, and it's very refreshing that it's a communal thing.
Yeah.
I had a different way of going about it. This
Yeah.
is back in July of 78 is when I don't like the word converted. I say I joined the tribe.
Mm.
But anyway, I'm not going to go as long as I did Sunday, the meeting Richard are in, where it was a meeting for people who were converting or had converting or just was interested in supporting at your competition down the street. And anyway, the way I didn't even remember till my wife reminded me about a week or so ago. I was doing the classes and stuff with the rabbi, and there was I don't know if he gave me the address or how I found it, because this is pre-internet. But anyway, it was an Air Force chaplain that's like an hour away from my Army base I was at, and so and the Army, everything like Europe is Army Post Office New York, so and then the other side is Army Post Office San Francisco. Somehow I got the name of the board of rabbis in New York City. And I don't know if the chaplain gave me that or I found it somehow. But anyway, they sent me a big case of literature, books, Bibles, pamphlets, whatever, because they were considered like the board of rabbis for all the military people that were going out of that post office. Anyway, my time of study wasn't that long. It's probably not as long as most people do, but I was not in a war at the time, but it was during the Vietnam War. And so I think the chaplain looked at it like, okay, he doesn't think he's going to Vietnam today or tomorrow, but he may be going any minute. So anyway, I got to a point where I decided this is what I believe, and now I know how to do this. And I went down and got new dog tags. And dog tags are put around, they issue those to you, and they'll issue new ones if you change your religion or you lose them or whatever. I went to the place that issued dog tags at the base I was at and got new dog tags before I ever converted, because I just knew where I belonged, where I was, and got new dog tags that said Jewish on it, because it has your name and it has your social security number and your blood type. Because the idea is if you get killed in combat, they take one of the dog tags and stick it between your teeth and your lower jaw and the space between your teeth and your mouth and jam it up there. So if somebody has to find you later on, they can read what your name is and what kind of chaplain you need and all that stuff on there. Well, I went and got new ones issued, and I told the rabbi, and I think it was not a test of knowledge and knowing the law. It was the idea to test of sincerity. And I decided to myself that I'm going to live as a Jew and I'm going to die as a Jew if I have to, whether or not anybody thinks I am or not. It'd be nice if they did. When I told him that, the next thing I know, we were scheduling. He's telling me that it's going to be your conversion ceremony at the next Friday night service, whatever. And I didn't even know I was having uh, a bit then, except I got my back. There was a bunch of the guys, who, as far as I knew, were born Jewish, were back there in the back. And the rabbi was talking about what they're going to do. And he says, "Oh, by the way, you have to say this to me." I said, "What?" You said I didn't have to learn the Hebrews. "Oh, this is nothing. You just have to say the first line. One of your friends here or teach it to you." It was like Panic City. But it was not a test of knowledge. I think it was a test of sincerity. And I already decided this is what I am. And if I'm going to live that way, I'm going to die that way. So it wasn't a test of knowledge. So I knew enough to satisfy him and the guys back there, which I didn't even know were my bet then at the time, and did it then. So I know it's completely different than you probably ever did it, Rabbi, or probably what you're going to have to do, Richard, or anybody else involved. But it was, it was doing more time, even though I wasn't in combat. But it was like a test of sincerity, and I made up the mind, you know, if am I going to die, it's going to say Jewish there, and I want a Jewish chaplain, and
Yeah.
that was good
Mm.
enough for him.
Right, right. I mean, and I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, it's a you make these when we make these commitments, um, you know, it's something that I, kind of reflected back to Richard before, which was that you have to there's the part where you could say to yourself, okay, this is all too hard, never mind. Then there's the other extreme of saying, oh my goodness, I didn't do X, Y, and Z, and then sort of the middle point is the thought of, okay, maybe I didn't do exactly as I needed to do yesterday, but today is a new day, right? It doesn't mean that I need to beat myself up for ways I may have fallen short before, nor does it mean that it's too late to start again, right? And I think what's sort of built into the writings of the Shulchan Aruch is that we have all of these different scenarios in which people are falling short of the ideal, or at least the ideal that they're presenting. And what we now have to do is like, okay, all right, we didn't pray shacharit, we didn't say the morning service when it was morning. Let's see what we can do in the afternoon to make up for it, if we can. We can't make up for it entirely, but at least we're going to do that, right? These conversations we had, like, what if you have to go to the bathroom in the middle of services, and how do you catch up, right? The answer isn't, how dare I have to go to the bathroom? The answer isn't, oh, well, there's no point in bothering praying because I might have to go to the bathroom in the middle of it. So what's the point? The answer is like, okay, we're going to try. And if something happens, all right, let's try to do it. Let's try to do as well as we can the next time. So that's what's so good. I think that's one of the things that's so good about this sort of this halachic system that we have, is that it trains us to forgive ourselves and to continue to challenge ourselves at the same time. So let's see. All right, we were talking about bowing. All right, let's go back to the bowing. Okay. Okay. We're talking about, okay, how one bows. I think this is maybe where we left off, around here. One should not bow so much that one's mouth would be opposite the belt of one's pants. In other words, don't do a 90-degree angle, I guess. Don't go beyond, don't try to make a 90-degree angle when you're bowing. If one is old or sick and cannot bow until all the vertebrae in one's spine sticks out, since one bends or lowers one's head, it is sufficient since it can be recognized that one wished to bow, but rather that the lack of bowing is on account of one's pain. So in other words, if your back is like, if you can't really, make a, you know, a bow of some, visual recognition, then if you're bowing your head, at least that's something, is what they're trying to say. If you are physically in a place where just bowing is just not an option, or at least bowing to that extent is not an option, you can bow your head. But regardless, to completely contort your body is really not what we should be going for. So then we tie into this. The next one. When one bows, one should bow quickly and all at once. When one straightens up, one straightens gently with one's head up first and then afterwards one's body, so that it not be burdensome for oneself. So in other words, when you bow, you bow. As opposed, you do it, you don't try to do it in slow motion, if you will. If it's the time to bow, you bow. And then don't try to sort of jerk your body straight again so quickly, especially if it's going to cause you physical pain.
You could get dizzy.
Right. 100%. So, try to, don't do unnecessary delays in starting in bowing, but don't give yourself whiplash either.
I think this differs from like even the Karaites and I guess the most Orthodox Jews, the Muslim, get on their knees, but they touch their head to the floors. So
Yeah.
apparently, no matter whatever kind of branch of Judaism is, you don't touch your head to the floor, even if you're all on your knees.
Right. And the exception, which we've talked about, is that of the is like several times during the high holidays. Mainly Yom Kippur are the times when one would do that. So yeah, that's so that's the idea.
Are you saying at that time you would touch your head to the floor or just get on your knees?
At a specific time, I do. That is when we are doing what is known as the Great Aleinu during the Musaf service repetition, during the Musaf Amidah repetition. And it really is only supposed to be for those times. There are some customs that the prayer leader, when they are doing the service of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur afternoon, that they will also, I don't believe that Rachel, who typically leads our high holiday services, at least certainly those parts, I don't think she does that necessarily, but there are some who will do it then as well, because the idea is that they're sort of imitating what the high priest did on that specific occasion. So those are the only exceptions, right? To actually bow, putting your face on the ground for a brief, like for literally a moment. Because biblically, the times when somebody would lower their heads to the ground, excuse me, would be times when, like, there were at least a couple times where Moses and Aaron did this at times of great peril. This was what's an example? I think during the episode of The Spies, when there was a near community revolt, when the spies said, "Oh, the land's not good enough. There's no way we can conquer it. We're in trouble here," and the people got riled up. You know, uh, Moses and Aaron, lay prostrate to the ground. Uh, but that was considered kind of an emergency. And so it's only, and whereas Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are not emergencies, they are the points of the year in which our we are which we are closest to talking about our own mortality and closest to saying, please have have mercy on us for our wrongdoing. So we do it briefly then. So it's a brief nod to it, but as opposed to, I mean, I've seen, Muslim prayer, um, five times a day. They are literally, um, you know, putting their heads to the ground, which, full respect to them. That's we only do so in the most um, on the rarest of circumstances is when we would do that. Um, this is something that I do try to be strict about. This is entry number 7, when it says when one bows at the word Baruch, and when one straightens up, one straightens at the divine name. I try to be particularly um, cognizant of this, because the idea is that when we are saying God's name, that we shouldn't be bent over. So, for instance, when we go Baruch Atah Adonai, that at Baruch the custom is to bend your knees. Atah, we bow, and Adonai, we're straightened again. So it is kind of it's a quick da 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 da, like it's kind of quick. Um, but the key, if possible, is to um, be done with the bowing when we are saying God's name, lest it appear that when saying God's name, we're communicating that it's okay to be, not upright. Questions about that? Okay. So now, this is interesting. One who is praying, and an idol worshiper came in front of one with a cross in hand, and the person praying arrived at the point at which where one bows, one should not bow, even though one's heart is directed toward heaven, worshiping only God. So, I mean, as we've touched upon, I mean, a lot of times when there are rules that when there are rules that it's like what kind of circumstance is this? There must have been a circumstance where this may have happened, where um, somebody walks in your immediate path and they have a symbol that would be inappropriate for a Jew to pray toward. Don't make it look like you're praying toward that symbol.
Correct.
Um, there are some people who there are some Jews I know that they would not even step foot inside a church, or at least a church sanctuary.
Yeah, I
Um,
do too. I just.
I'm sorry?
No, I
Sorry?
said when my brother-in-law got married, my brother-in-law was Irish Catholic, and
Mhm.
my mother-in-law's best friends and next door neighbors were Jews, and they wouldn't come to the church. They came to the reception, but they wouldn't go in the church,
Yeah.
which I found
So,
odd at the time, but what can you do?
well, so it goes to this question of Marit Ayin, the appearance of impropriety, even if there is no impropriety happening. Um, I don't I don't I don't follow this, right? I don't follow this idea that you can't walk inside a church sanctuary. Um, I don't think that even being present at a Christian ceremony is a problem, as long as we're not doing, as long as we're not saying, prayers that involve a Christian God. Um, in in Charleston, I had the opportunity to attend a number of different ecumenical services, um, and some even just Christian services surrounding Martin Luther King Day. Um, I went to one at a at a church in downtown Charleston. This was an AME congregation, one of the major black churches in Charleston, and I mean, that was an amazing experience. It was absolutely amazing. First of all, that choir was just out of this world. I mean, absolutely incredible. And I was there because, like, as a community rabbi, like, they wanted to have, people of different faiths, everybody say a little something. So, I had a little something that I was able to say in there. But, you know, it was just an absolutely fantastic place to be. At no point did I feel, nor I hope anybody felt, that they had to uh, say amen to um, any of the things in which any of the prayers that praise Jesus. I think all you have to do is just be respectful and nod your head and be like, okay, great. you know
What's the logic of that? If you're going to a church, what's going to happen to you for going to a church?
It's so one could see it, and I'm not defending it, because I don't agree with it, but one could see it as a case of as putting a fence around the Torah, that um, meaning, okay, the rule is, don't pray to don't pray to a god other than the God of Israel, right? That's a pretty important one. uh, but the thought might be that if you walked inside a church, you know you might be either tempted to pray in such a way, or you may, and I don't know how this would happen, but you would accidentally say something that you shouldn't say.
Well,
I don't
there,
know how I don't know
there,
how accidental it would be, but
I've been to many Catholic funerals,
Mhm.
the funeral masses, and there are points in the service and everybody's like shaking each other's hands and saying, "Peace be upon you" and stuff, and it's a little weird.
Mhm.
And I mean, Jesus doesn't enter into that specific, but it's yeah, I don't know. I never felt like we were doing anything wrong, but it's hard, like when somebody's grabbing your hand and saying, "Peace be with you," that you don't shake their hand. I mean, what are you gonna do? Oh my God, I'm Jewish, don't touch me. I mean, it's a
Right,
little
right.
weird.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like
Yeah.
there's
Take that as a compliment. It's showing that they
Yeah,
appreciate you, welcome you.
it's like fellowship.
Yeah,
But we did,
right.
especially in the 90s when we were very, very involved in politics in New Jersey, we belonged to every civic association created, many of whom, most of which the members were very, very largely Irish Catholic. And there was a priest who was a very good friend of ours, Father Pat, may he rest in peace, who would do the invocation, and we were there. He would always leave Jesus out.
Yeah.
Out of deference to us, he just, at the end when they throw Jesus in, he would make it sort of ecumenical, which we appreciated. Just thought I'd say that. It was very nice of him to do that.
We did this thing we did this thing in Charleston in my synagogue where I invited a where we where it's like we were in the course of a Friday night service we were sharing music of like we were sharing some of our Jewish music with music of this choir, this a Christian choir. And it was a really turned out to be a very nice event. But like, I mean, the one thing I had to explain is like, can we pick songs that are not Jesus specific?
Yeah.
Because to do that in the sanctuary of a synagogue would not be received well.
Yeah.
But they were like, okay, we get it. That's fine. And it's like we have a bunch of different songs so we were able to to kind of work that out. But yeah, I mean, it's the one thing I will say, and not to excuse anything that might feel kind of I don't want to make it sound like it's xenophobic or anything like that, but I would suggest that part of the reluctance of the rabbis over many centuries was that in many cases, a lot of them could not conceive of a someone who wasn't Jewish being with Jews in an ecumenical fashion. They're, I mean, if you look at the course of the Middle Ages, I mean, I would imagine that most Christians would not be shy about saying, well, of course you need to, of course you're doing the wrong thing. Of course you need to be, I mean, like that was, and in many cases there were, actions, some of them violent, trying to get us to not worship the way we want to worship. I mean, so could they imagine an ecumenical setup where everybody's just gathering together in peace? They probably couldn't conceive of it.
No.
So,
and it worked both ways, right? I mean, Christians didn't want Jews among them, and Jews traditionally did not want Christians among them either. So it's only that's a modern thing, the ecumenical.
Right.
Here.
Right. And some of the some of this reluctance was like it wasn't without reason. I mean, it's like the concerns were real. So that's anyway. So I just think that's worth remembering. that doesn't mean that we necessarily have to hang on to the same amount of skepticism that our ancestors did. That hopefully we have, as a society, communally at least, move past some of that. At least in some communities. Okay. Now, one may not, this isn't really about bowing, at least that I can tell. One may not add to the descriptions of the Holy One who is blessed more than Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hano Ra, meaning the great and the mighty and the awesome God. Now, those words, by the way, are referring to like their ideas very much present in the 13 attributes of God, that what Moses utters when God's back is passing before him in Exodus chapter 34. And this, meaning this phrase, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hano Ra, is specifically in the Amidah, since one may not change the formulation that the sages formulated. However, in the supplications, pleas, and praises that a person says oneself, there is no problem with it. Nevertheless, it is proper that one who wants to lengthen the praises of the omnipresent should say it using biblical verses. So this has to do with a certain level of improvisation that one has in individual prayer. Not that the prayer leader needs to, the prayer leader is not supposed to start improving different things. But in one's individual prayers, you can do a little bit of, you are allowed to add in certain places, but if you do it, better that you, or it makes the most sense to include verses from the Tanakh, as opposed to just something we come up with on our own. In other words, it's like, don't take my word for it. Take the word of the people who, of the original sources. I feel like this section honestly belonged in one of the previous sections that we were looking at before, but I guess it just kind of got stuck here. Any other comments or questions before we move on a little farther? Okay. So now, the laws of mentioning the wind and rain and Mountain Dew. No, not Mountain Dew, just dew. Okay. We start to say, Mashiv haruach u'morid hagashem, who that God makes the wind blow and rain fall. In the second blessing in the Musaf prayer of the Amidah, of the latter Yom Tov of Chag, meaning on Shmini Atzeret, the last part of the major holiday of Sukkot. And we don't stop saying it until the Musaf prayer, the Amidah, of the first Yom Tov of Pesach, of the beginning of the holiday of Passover. Gilia, we're in your wheelhouse, right?
You betcha. Yes, that's my absolute favorite.
So for those who might not know, Gilia almost always, at least certainly the couple years I've been at Escamuna, has been the one to lead the service at the point in which we have a brief ritual to either start saying Mashiva Ruach Morid Hagashem, or when we stop, or when we stop saying it. And there is a full ritual with that. Gilia, how would you characterize that ritual? What can you offer in case for those who might not know much about it?
Well, we ask God for rain because if we don't get rain, we can't have any crops, and therefore we can't eat. So I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I know how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. The only thing I would add is that we like sort of the main bits of it have to do with recalling the merits of our ancestors,
Right.
the merits of patriarchs and matriarchs, etc., and to say, and then, but also, but others. I mean, not going beyond Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Becca, Rachel, and Leah. Going sort of through like, okay, you provided water in this case, you provided dew in that case.
Right. And then
so-
the melodies reflect Yom Kippur.
Mhm.
There are several passages that take directly melodies from Yom Kippur. So we, in a way, go back to that important holiday. So
Yeah. Yeah. And then you typically wear a kittel.
yeah, you do. So traditionally, yes.
Yeah.
It's the book. I call it the bookends. Slichot is the beginning, and then the prayer for rain is the end. And in between, we have Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. So anyway, so this is so I don't think this is going to be dealing with specifically those prayers, to begin and end it. I think it's about the overall practice, but we'll see. Okay, now it is forbidden to mention rain until the prayer leader proclaims it.
right.
Meaning, like
Very end.
it's like we have to have the big, we have to have the ceremony. We have to have the big announcement, right? And some say that before that they start the Musaf prayer, the attendant proclaims who makes the wind blow, etc. So the congregation should remember to say it in their prayer. And that is how we practice. Now, I don't know whether this has to do with when we started. In other words, like, hey, everybody, don't forget Mashiva Ruach Morid Hagashem. I typically do that. I feel like I try to remember to say, like, so for instance, Shmini Atzeret goes, then, within hours later, we're starting Simchat Torah, right? And when we do Simchat Torah, like we have just started saying Mashiva Ruach Morid Hagashem. So I try to remind people, like the first couple of services after, okay, remember that we're adding this to our Amidah. But after a bit, it's like, okay, I try not to remind every time. Therefore, even if one is sick and has an extenuating circumstance that prevents him from praying in the synagogue, one should not advance one's Amidah prayer. So it is before the congregation's prayer, since it is forbidden to mention rain until the prayer leader says it. But if one knows that the prayer leader proclaims it, even though oneself did not hear it, one may mention it. So I think what they're trying to say is that, like, at the synagogue, you really need to make sure that you're mentioning it. You really need to make sure that you do it for the sake of those, either whether they're at synagogue or not that day. And for this reason, it goes on, the one who came late to synagogue and the congregation had already started to pray the Musaf Amidah, one should pray and mention rain even though one did not hear the announcement from the prayer leader. So, in other words, congregations should make sure that they make the announcement. But if you weren't there for the announcement, it doesn't mean you get to skip it. Still got to say it. But it adds to the importance of being there to say it so that you have that reminder in your back pocket. I will acknowledge that usually the first couple of weeks of Shmini Atzeret, after Shmini Atzeret, I mean, there are times where I forget for a second, like oh shoot, that will happen from time to time. Now, if one said Mashiv Haruach in the hot season, in other words, in the warmer months when you're not supposed to say it, or if one did not say it in the rainy season, we make that person go back and do it correctly. In other words, like, you really shouldn't forget this. And if you do forget it, you got to start the Amidah over. Like, this is an important one. And similarly, regarding the reference to Jew, if one mentioned it in the rainy season, or if one did not mention it in the hot season, we do not go back. So it's not as big a deal the other way around.
So I have a question, Rabbi.
Go for it.
Why did we get away from saying Morit Hatal most of the time? I say it, a couple other people say it, but most people don't say Morit Hatal.
Okay. So what so the issue is, so what Gilya is referring to is the practice that during the half of the year when we don't say Mashiv HaRuach Morit HaGashem, that there are many who have the practice of instead at that point inserting the words Morit Hatal, that God is the one who brings dew, so that there is enough, moisture during, the summer months.
Right.
The issue, honestly, has to do with height. That if you are below 5'2", you can't say Morit Hatal because you're not tall enough. I'm kidding.
No.
No.
Really? You're kidding? We wouldn't have known that.
I'm okay. Yeah. No. In all seriousness,
this seems like a whole lot of hoopla over rain, honestly. But when we were at the cave of the Machpelah recently, it was pouring rain. It was freezing cold. It was miserable outside. And Rav Simcha was saying, "Isn't this fantastic? We prayed for rain and we got rain. It's raining." He was like very happy it was raining, and we were all like miserable and wet. But it's a big deal because it doesn't rain all that often, I guess. I mean, they really need the rain.
Yep.
Because this does seem like a whole lot of rules and just over rain.
Yeah, it's reflective of, the agrarian society that so many people, were far more dependent on than perhaps we are now. Although I would suggest, though, that when we look at that, to me, I feel like it is, even though, it's like, I like to say, right, it's like, where do apples come from? They come from the supermarket, right? I mean, like we live in a time where we don't usually grow our own food. At least most of us don't. So we don't necessarily think of the cycle of rain as something impacting our lives. I do think, though, that we can make a direct link um, to environmental concerns, where it's not always when there is rain. It's not only whether there is rain, it's when the rain comes. That having rain in the right season, having weather patterns that match the season is very important, and something that climate change has um, uh, messed with in a lot of ways. So
The Sahara Desert used to be the breadbasket of Africa. You do know that, right? I mean, the climate's always changed.
true. I do think that the rapidity of climate change, the sort and the extremities of some of the modern weather patterns have really wreaked havoc on a lot of things. So, part of what we are, part of the meaning of it, I think, today I feel is to is to create a world in which the environment should work as it ought to, as it naturally ought to, right? I mean, it's like, as opposed to before the earth is ready for it to change, before we are ready for the earth to change. So yeah, it does feel like a lot. I will acknowledge that. It does feel like a lot to talk about, a lot of fuss over rain sometimes. Um, I honestly grew up not liking the rain at all. Because when you're in Little League and and when you see dark clouds on the day of a game, it's like, oh, we don't get to play today because it might rain. That would just break my 10-year-old heart. I still don't like rain when it comes to the possibility of canceling a baseball game, but I recognize that, we need it. We do need it, and we need it to happen at the right time. So let me stop here for the time being. We'll pick up on this next week, and I appreciate, as always, the conversation and consideration.
Yes, of course.
Bruce, yeah. All right, we'll see you
Thank
soon,
you very
everybody.
much.
Rabbi,
Have
Yeah.
a good day.
shall we go ahead and just schedule for 2 weeks before?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. I forgot to do that. Let me check